right. Well, good morning, you guys. I am not Ben. My name is Chad. And really quick, I got here by way of Jessup. So if you're just kind of wondering who's this guy and how does he end up here, I actually went to that school way back when it was in San Jose, so San Jose Christian College. So I graduated there a long time ago and pastored a ton of years since, was a part of a couple different church plants and some other boring things that did. So did that for a long time, and then when my kids, I have 3 kids, when they got about teenage years, life was pretty out of balance. We had started a church, and I was working another job. I was selling shoes at Nordstrom, so lots of fun stories there that will be for another time. And just things were out of whack, so I took a step back from formal ministry, so any kind of positional thing, and just took care of home. And one of the best decisions I ever made, and it was actually pretty hard, because I had a lot of identity wrapped up in my role as a pastor. So really good for me in my heart. Now they're older, 20, 18, and almost 16, which is crazy. And my oldest just got engaged. So this is like weird. And if you don't think I'm old enough for that, I don't either, but I am, apparently. And I do have the gray. So they're all older, and so now it's the time of, okay, they don't need me as much. And so how can I love and serve more? And so I'm stepping back into this kind of role. So I'm connected with Jessup University, which you guys are partnered with and a part of, and lots of great relationships. So this has been a very relational connection of like, how can we love and serve one another? Whenever I hear of, especially young pastors who are just doing the work of loving a community week after week and need a week off, my heart just goes like, oh man, how can I help you do that? Like, that's awesome. And obviously it's not a vacation week. It's the best of all reasons to take a week off. Hopefully you get more than a week. Back in my day, I got a week off of work for each kid. That's not normal. Now I hear about like all kinds of paternal leaves for months and stuff. Anyway, that's not what I prepared. Okay. This week, whenever there's like a one-off opportunity, this is one of the cries of my heart. I'm trying to give you a little bit of who I am, so I'm not such a stranger. One of the cries of my heart is there's so many people out there who have rejected a version of Jesus that isn't the real him. And I just think if people could encounter the real Jesus and all that he is and all that he's done for them and his heart for them, like, who would reject that? And I know we know in this world that some still would, but how many millions would turn to Jesus if they could just encounter the real him? And so anytime I have like this one-off opportunity, I just want to get deep into a story of Jesus where he's interacting with another person, because this thing happens, and I'll start within the natural, and then we'll go to the spirit, but this thing happens when we hear stories. I love stories and storytelling. When you hear a story, this thing happens called neural mirroring, which is it's hard to say, so you have to practice if you're going to do this. Neural mirroring, where your brain chemicals are actually firing as if you were in the story. So when you and I hear a story, that's why we like stories so much, whether it's in form of film or movies, TV, books. We love stories because we're starting to get a measure of what's happening in the story. We're starting to experience it in a small way. So I love giving a story of Jesus, knowing that that's happening natural, but how much more in the spirit when the spirit starts moving and revealing who Jesus is. And so if I could tell the story of Jesus and have people encounter the real him, that's like deep in the core of why I do this thing. And so that's just my hope for today. We're going to look at a story of Jesus encountering a couple people that I think is very powerful and reveals a lot about who he is. And then hopefully the prayer is that as we do this, we're experiencing a real genuine encounter with the living God right now. And that you get to see, meet, interact with, and experience the real Jesus right here, right now, because he is alive and well and for you and for me, okay? So that's what we'll go into today. We're going to go to Luke 8. We're going to end up zooming in on verse 40, but I need to give a little bit of context. So if you want to turn to verse 40, that's great. And let me just read the first part. I'm going to read verse 1. You don't even have to turn there. You can stay on verse 40 because we'll be right back there. Soon afterward, he went through the cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Jonah, the wife of Chuza, I think, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their means. I wanted to read that because it gives us the context for this whole chapter. He's saying he's going through these cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. with his 12 disciples. So this whole chapter is him bringing the good news of the kingdom. And what we're going to see, we're not spending any time today, but the rest of chapter 8, you see him teaching about the kingdom, and he's teaching through parables, and then he goes and he calms the storm and the sea. Remember that when they're in the boat, if you've heard that one, and he calms it, and he's demonstrating his power over creation. He goes and he casts out demons out of somebody, and then we come to our section where we're going to see him deal with the sick and someone who has died. And so all along, he's given these experiential examples of the coming of the kingdom of heaven. That it's the kind of kingdom where it has power and authority over all of creation, that casts out demons, and that, as we're going to see, heals the sick and raises the dead. Okay, so that's our broader context. Now let's look in at our passage, and we're going to start with verse 40 and read through 43. Now when Jesus had returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored them to come to his house, for he had an only daughter who was about 12 years of age, and she was dying. And as Jesus went, the people pressed around him, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. Okay, so as Jesus is going and building the kingdom, we get these two characters coming into our story, and I really want to highlight them. We're going to spend most of the time on the woman, but there's something to be learned by these two. And there's a common place that they find themselves here at Jesus in desperation. Okay, so to introduce kind of those two characters, I want to just highlight, I mentioned enjoying stories and reading, is this technique that authors will use called contrast. Not like contrast, they invented it, but they use it in storytelling. And it's the kind of thing where you put two people who are total opposites side by side, and they're connected by some sort of theme or purpose or whatever. And in doing so, you see each more vividly, right? So this is like seeing Han Solo next to Luke Skywalker type of thing. Like Luke Skywalker's young, idealistic, he's moral, he's innocent. Han Solo was like the ragamuffin, rebellious one who was immoral, would just do things for money. So let's stick them together, send them in this purpose, and just see what happens. And both characters become more vivid to us. It's the Michael Scott next to a Jim Halpert. It's something that is just used to draw out and draw attention to characters, right? It's also just used in natural, like again, I said my oldest daughter got engaged, and it brings me back to when I went ring shopping lots of years ago for my wife, and they would take the diamonds and they would lay out a black velvet thing, like a little mat, and they would place the diamond on it. Complete contrast so that you would see more to the diamond, more of its brilliance and its shine and all of those things, the characteristics that they wanted to come out. So authors will use contrast. I bring that up to say we could not have two more contrasting characters here finding themselves together at the feet of Jesus. First one is Jairus. Let's just zoom in on him. All we know is he's a ruler of the synagogue. So in that time, the Jewish worship, you had the temple in Jerusalem, and then you would have all the local synagogues. And so the ruler of the synagogue would be the one in charge of the administration and all the functions of the synagogue. It'd be a very well-respected position. He would have a sense of purpose and belonging in that time, in that culture, and amongst his people. It was very prominent, and it was also something that was appointed by the elders or the community. So he must have had a great reputation and been somebody who was liked and revered and respected. So he had that role, that purpose, that belonging. He also had this loving relationship with his daughter and all the joys that come with being a father of your daughter and watching her raise and grow up. And that's been his experience for the past 12 years. And then, of course, we don't know the details, but something goes wrong and his daughter is sick, and now he finds himself desperate and at the feet of Jesus. So one little note that we can certainly draw out already from the story is no matter how well things have gone, no matter how good you are at life in this crazy fallen world, no matter how successful, respected, or revered, even if you have belonging, at some point you will, like all of us, find yourself at the feet of Jesus in need. that you will come to the point where you face things that you cannot do in your own power, your own strength, your own ability. And that you'll find yourself in need of a God who's not only powerful but loving on your behalf. And so he has had all of these, quote, successes in place of belonging, and yet finds himself desperate at the feet of Jesus. And the feet of Jesus is also where we find our second character. So there's this theme in Luke that we're not going to spend much time on of just people ending up at the feet of Jesus. And if you were to take them, you see, put them all side by side, you see rich, you see poor, you see a man, you see a woman, you see someone who is considered clean, someone who's considered unclean. You see Jew and Samaritan all finding themselves at the feet of Jesus, and guess what? All receiving mercy and healing and what they needed in that moment. So there's an early point for us to make of, man, we all look a lot more similar than we do different when we're at the feet of Jesus. And all of us find ourselves, whether the past 12 years have been beautiful or terrible, we all find ourselves at his feet in need for him to move on our behalf. And so there's a cool little, again, just an early side note. But here's where I really want to dive more deeply into, is who is this woman? So we know Jairus had his last 12 years, and for the most part was very good and successful, though he's certainly going through an impossibly difficult time. The woman, however, has been bleeding for 12 years. And so all we know from that initial reading is that she spent all of her money and would continue to get her hope up, only to have it dashed time and time again. But what I want you to know is this condition is more than just a physical one for her. It's more than just uncomfortable, super inconvenient, and makes it hard. I don't want to make jokes because that would be. It makes it difficult for her to interact socially. It's much more than that. Let me read to you the. I don't know you guys well enough yet to know like the joke boundaries, right? So that was what was going on in here. Was, ooh, like let's save that for maybe after I spent some time with you guys. Yeah. Oh, my wife would be shaking her head. Okay. So here's coming back somehow into the passage. This is the description of their culture. This is the Old Testament, what to do during a woman's cycle. When a woman has a discharge and the discharge in her body is blood, she shall be in her menstrual impurity for 7 days. And whoever touches her shall be unclean until the evening. And everything on which she lies during her menstrual impurity shall be unclean. Everything also on which she sits shall be unclean, and whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until evening. And whoever touches anything on which she sits shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening. Second little section, if a woman has a discharge of blood for many days and not at the time of her menstrual impurity, or if she's a discharge of blood beyond the time of her impurity, all the days of the discharge, she shall continue in uncleanness, as in the days of her impurity, she shall be unclean. Sounds harsh to our current cultural context, but it wasn't. This was something that God would give that would also have very practical benefits as far as just hygiene in life. And remember, this was a very different time. However, what was written by God to be a grace and an instruction has become an imprisonment for her. The resounding theme of that whole thing I just read was that she's unclean. And she is untouchable for 12 years. For 12 years, she cannot be touched by another person without them becoming unclean, even to the degree that if she touches something and then they go and touch that, then they're unclean. Like it's her and all the things surrounding her. And so for the past 12 years, she's been marked not only by the discomfort that this condition brings. Not only is she broke because she keeps spending all of her money, getting her hopes up only to have them dashed again and again and again, but she has to deal with isolation and being a total outcast that she cannot have human contact for over a decade. And what that begins to do to your understanding of yourself and your psyche, like that is so deep. We experienced a measure, some of us during COVID, of like what isolation can do and how for many of us it was a downward spiral. It's a struggle. We're meant for connection and relationship and meaning. A big part of that is actually human touch. And for 12 years, not only does she not get it, but instead of that, she is just marked by this, I'm unclean. And that would be such a weight on her person. I try to contextualize these stories. I want to understand what they felt like. And so I look back 12 years ago. So just think back 12 years ago. I mean, my kids were a lot more affordable, but they had a lot more energy. They were, let me do some math on the fly. Was it 12, 10, and 8? No, that would be 8 years. 8, 6, and 4. And just that's a totally different world and season of parenting and life and all the things. So you think back 12 years ago. I wasn't even in the career field that I do in my full-time job. I wasn't even in that yet. 12 years ago. And all the life experience that you've had since that point. And if all the days from that day to this one were marked by the same condition, the same weight, and the same feeling of that you were unclean, I think it's the point is come across, hopefully, that this would be such a life-defining condition, that she was the outcast, she didn't belong, she can't do anything because she is the one who is unclean. And then she hears these rumors and these whispers and these stories that there's a healer, and there's this Messiah guy who we don't know what he's about, but I heard that he healed this person, and he healed this person, this Jesus. Somehow, in some way, I don't know how it went down, she began to hear of Jesus. And I think when you start to look slowly through this story, this woman's faith is incredible. And she musters up again her hope and her courage that maybe this guy will be the one. And for some reason, she is filled with hope and trust, or maybe not trust, but hope and faith, and goes and sees this Jesus and goes after him and is ready to try again, despite all of her disappointments, that maybe this guy, it seems different, it feels different, maybe he's the one. And so that's where she's at, and let's see what she does with Jesus. So picking up in verse 44. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. And immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surrounding you are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And we'll pause there. So she finds her way, she gets her courage up, she goes and she touches Jesus and she's healed. And there's two things I want to highlight about this. First one is just kind of on the practical level, she touches the fringe of his garment. And that is actually significant in itself too. The fringe had meaning and purpose. So the fringe of like a rabbi's garment and this tassel that she held onto is, it was actually symbolic. So let me read this. Out of the Old Testament law, they said to make tassels on the corners, this is from Numbers 15, make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner as a reminder that they were God's people called to keep his commandments. So she has an idea somehow and knowing that if I could just touch his garment that I would be healed, and yet she's touching the very place that is created to symbolize the words that condemn her as unclean. There's this amazing thing happening. She shows up, believes that Jesus can heal her, and yet he's surrounded with a group of people. She's like, great, I have to touch them in order to get to him. And then she grabs onto the place that symbolizes the very words that condemn her in her condition. Not condemn her because she did something wrong, but condemn her and say she is unclean. And somehow she has to believe that the mercy and goodness of this Jesus healer is bigger than the consequences of the touch and then even those words that are written. She has to believe that his mercy will triumph over her judgment. So often, what stands between us and our encounter with Jesus, our healing, is thinking that we're going to receive judgment and condemnation instead of mercy and grace. That instead of receiving his goodness, we're going to receive his wrath. And somehow, in some way, again, I am in awe of her faith because she believes, with not having any track record that we know of, just what she's heard, she believes that he's going to be so good and gracious and powerful that if I can just touch him, he will heal me, even though I don't deserve it. I haven't earned it. I know that the words of the very Old Testament law condemn me in my condition. I know that I shouldn't be touching these people that are all around him. But if I can just get to him, I believe his goodness and his power is bigger than all of that. And she overcomes the things that we all face when we move towards God in healing. It was the pattern set forth in the garden where Adam and Eve hid in their sin, and God called them out of hiding, and they had to come and face God for the first time, having no track record if he was merciful. Right? Like Adam and Eve get a bad rap. This is a little bit of rabbit trail, but I love this one. I think it's good. They had no track record of God being gracious or merciful. It hadn't had a chance to be seen yet. So when he calls them out of hiding, remember they sinned and they fell and they were hidden and they created their fig leaf garments. He calls them out of hiding. They had to go and stand before him in this now sinful nature, not knowing if he was going to be good or merciful or just end it right there. And I think that set forth the pattern for healing, is that we come out of hiding and we receive grace and mercy in a time of need through now we all know that ultimately the work of Jesus on the cross, but we come out of hiding like this woman comes forth and grabs it. So it's just a very powerful thing. So that's in the kind of the practical. The second thing is the idea that this whole crowd is pressing around Jesus, that they're all touching him. And yet, what would it mean for this woman to be the one touch out of this whole crowd that meant something? Right? He stops and he says, power has gone out from me. Hold on, everybody. And they're like, what are you talking about? You're getting touched all over the place. But he's stopping because there's one kind of touch that means something more. And what would it begin to do? And this is where I think we see Jesus go after. I'm not just trying to heal your condition. I'm trying to redeem your whole identity. I think we're going down that road here because he heals her, not through his touch, but by receiving her touch. The touch that's supposed to make everything unclean, he receives that and heals her through that. Like it's the most intimately personal healing she could possibly receive, is for him to stop and say, I'm being touched by all these people, yet there's one heart here that is moving the power of God, and he receives her touch, the very thing that has been excluded for so long. And I just think there's a powerful thing in that's of all the ways, that's the way he chooses to heal her is amazing. But there's even more in Jesus' heart for her. He always goes beyond what we think. And let's read it, and then we'll get into this. Let's read the next couple verses. So he's like, who is it that touched me? And when they are like, the crowd's pressing around you, verse 46, but Jesus said, someone has touched me, for I perceive that power's gone out from me. And here's the new one, 47. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him and declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. So as far as we can tell from this story, she was hoping to go and get this healing and then just like sneak out of there, right? She knew what she was doing and that she's been an outcast, and knew that, there would be a whole scene if she was in there touching everybody. So she wants to get her healing and sneak out of there. And it's that moment where it's like oh no, the music's going to stop and everybody's going to go quiet and all the eyes are going to go on me, right? It's that moment. So I had this experience before, in this weird way, like very strange story, where I was at this ministry going back a few years, probably like 7 years now. And I had a lot of volunteers that were helping with setup and teardown. So I had a lot of phone numbers that I didn't save, like who was from. So I got a text this one time and it said, hey, we're throwing a surprise party for Zach, and we're going to watch the Super Bowl, and then it's going to be a surprise party for him. Like the Super Bowl party was the front, and the surprise party for Zach. I didn't save the number, but I only knew one Zach. So I was like, okay, cool. And so I was like, all right, we'll be there. I'll bring my kids. I drive like 45 minutes out into like the woods where there's nobody there, and I'm like starting to get that feeling of like something's not quite right. And we get there. I have two of my kids. My wife's going to come later with another one, and none of the cars I recognize from this like group of people are there. So I'm like, this is weird. And then I knock on the door, and this woman answers, and I realize two things at the same time. One, she is not who I thought was texting me. And two, I have no idea who her son Zach is. Like, none. But now, like, we're 45 minutes out in the woods, and I'm like, and I don't want to be rude face to face. Like, I should have just been like, hey, you are not who I thought you were. I'm gonna go ahead and go home. But I'm not that guy. So I go in there, and this is where it's gonna loosely relate. It's like 20, 30 people of Zach's closest family and friends, and me, and I don't know who he is. And the only kids there are my kids. And so for the next like first half of the Super Bowl, it's just this super awkward time of me feeling like, how did I get here? Who is this guy? Like trying to look for family pictures, and then small talk of like, how do you know Zach? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So long, forget how we've met. Like I don't know how to. And my kids, I don't know what to tell them because they were expecting to hang out with their friends from church, and I'm like, sorry, just go eat the food. So my kids are over eating all the snacks, and it finally, just to like wrap it up, is he shows up, and it's like the big reveal. And so I make my way to the back because I figure like it's not good in your surprise party for there to be a stranger right in front of you. So I go to the back, and then they do the surprise, and I see who it is, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know that guy. It's the guy I had one work meeting with one time, and I think somehow the mom thought we were friends or something like that. Like that was the disconnect. Is somehow the mom thought we were friends, and I thought I did have a friend, Zach, who turns out had a Super Bowl party that day too. And I was like, that's where I wanted to be. That's where I meant to be. But as she's walking him over to say hi to me at one point, like she's telling him who I am. Like he doesn't remember me either. So I'm like, what is happening? Like, and they're like, maybe this is like a next level surprise party, right? Like I get surprised, you get surprised, and like we're all. And we tried to have a conversation, and it was like, you still work that job? And I'm like, no. Or like, you still do the graphic design? He doesn't do that anymore too. So like. The one connection we had was gone, and we're just like, okay, yeah, I give up. So that was, but the feeling I had walking around the room before he showed up was, and it was exaggerated in my mind, but I'm like nervous and sweating, and like the feeling I had was at any moment, like all the conversation would stop, and everybody would realize at once, like, you don't know Zach, like, who are you? And I'd be like, you're right, I don't know, I don't even know where I am. But it was this terrible tension of like, at any moment I'm going to be outed because I clearly don't belong. And that was the feeling. And I know that's like a silly way, but she's in that moment where like the worst thing that could happen after she grabs the tassel would be for everybody to stop and look at her. Like she does not want to be the center of attention, and she does not want to be outed in this moment. And yet that's exactly what happens. All eyes to her, and Jesus is the one who stops it all. He's like, wait a minute. All eyes on her, the outcast at the feet of Jesus. And what he says next will determine how it's going to go for her. That's all that matters. What he says. If he condemns her in this moment, it's going to go really bad for her. And she'll go from outcast to more outcast. I don't know. It just wouldn't go well. But if he receives her, if he honors her, if he in any way is positive, it's going to start to rebuild this picture of her life and this identity of hers. And yet he doesn't just do that. He says the most remarkable thing. He tells her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. And this is the first time and the only time that Jesus calls an individual daughter. It's almost as though, I couldn't say it for sure, but it feels like he's waited to give that revelation just for her. And he calls her, the only time he calls an individual, daughter. And all that means, I have 2 daughters. It just feels different than a son. I love my son, and he's great too. But the feeling of being a girl dad is one of the greatest things in my life. And the amount of cherishing, and she can do no wrong, and apple of my eye, and I'm so thankful she's a daddy's girl, like all of those things that come with it when I say daughter about one of mine, and how nobody's ever going to be good enough for them, and if anybody messes with them, like it's on, like all of those feelings, the protection, the admiration. And then there's just this, now that they're older, it's this, I guess fear would be the right word, that will their lives take them away where I don't know what's going on? You know, like I just so want to keep this knowing and this tight relationship where I know them, they know me, and we know what's going on in each other's lives. Like, I just don't want that. So go do whatever, conquer the world, but let's not lose that. To think that that's how Jesus was feeling about her, all that she had known for the last 12 years, and he's saying, no, you are my daughter. And he brings her all the way back in, belonging, purpose, meaning. I think it's crazy that in this story, we never get her name. We know Jairus' name. He names other women in this passage. We never get her name. It's as if she goes from being the one who was a nobody to now having the highest place of being the beloved daughter. And that's the kingdom that he's building. That's what he is doing as he's redeeming the lost sons and daughters. As he's calling you and I back to this place of belonging and purpose where he cherishes and protects and watches over, and he just wants to know and be known by you as we walk through this life together. And it's far greater than what she would have had in her mind or heart. And it's so like Jesus. He doesn't expose us to put us down or to condemn us. He exposes us so that he can heal us and bring it into this right place and this right relationship with him. But he's not done for the day. So Jesus goes and then he heals. Let's read it. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like it's not as good. It is good. While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler of the house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered, "Do not fear, only believe that she will be well." And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called and said, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. And so Jesus goes on, and then not only does he heal the one who is sick, but he raises the one who is dead. And again, remember, this is all a demonstration of his kingdom. And so his kingdom is the kind where the lost sons and daughters are coming back to the Father, and also where the dead are being raised and brought into newness of life. I think it's fun and interesting that the first thing he instructs, he's so good, such a good caretaker, he says, let's get her a snack. Somebody go get her something to eat. Like, she's probably hungry. It's very practical. I don't know if it was vanilla wafers we got growing up in Sunday school or goldfish, probably one of those two. Just kidding about that. But he just, I don't know, I think it's funny that he says, like, make sure she gets a snack. Here's how I see this connecting. We had these two contrasting characters. But all along the way, the undercurrent is he's demonstrating the kingdom, right? He's leading his disciples through this is what the kingdom of God is going to be like. And so they get to see and experience somebody being brought back as a daughter, but then also seeing a father and daughter reunited into newness of life as Jairus gets to celebrate. And the disciples are watching this dramatic celebration of she was dead and now she's alive. And you can almost hear him saying what he reveals later as he's teaching them, that this is what it's like. This is what it's like for my Father to be reunited with his sons and daughters. You see the joy in Jairus' face? That's what my Father is like. And that's what he's doing. There's another thread that connects this, and it's the number 12. Number 12, like throughout Scripture, is used in relationship to God's like structure of his kind of like administration of his kingdom. I struggle for the right words because it's like a governmental like pillars, but I don't like using the word government because we think of our crazy government. What I mean is like the structure of his kingdom, like 12, there were the 12 tribes of Judah, 12 disciples. They become the 12 apostles. It's this kind of like foundational pillars of his kingdom. And so this starts with the 12 disciples learning about the kingdom in verse 1. And then it goes to the 12 years and the 12 years. And then the next thing we see in chapter 9, verse 1, and he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. Sound familiar? They just experienced that. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. And so we see this, it's not just for them to hear about and to experience, but then it's for them to go and do. And these things that they just walked through, of demons being cast out, and then the sick being come and brought back, and then the daughters being reunited with the fathers. Those are all things that are pillars of the kingdom of heaven, and that's what they're to go and do afterward. So that's what I think ties this whole chapter together in the bigger purpose of what Jesus is doing. Oh, wow, I'm way back on my notes. Here's what I want to say for you and I. I want to just tie it very simply in three ways. And rather than saying, like, here's 3 applications to go and do, I'm going to say there's 3 invitations. I just think how that God works that way. He's always inviting us into more. So here's 3 invitations based on this passage and based on what we just covered. Is 1, what is the area of your life? Thinking of the woman who was healed. This was the specific area of her life that brought her condemnation and made her an outcast, is the place where Jesus met her, right? He met her through her touch, which was the representation of her condition. What is the place for us that we feel like is the one that is the reason why we're the exception and God's goodness is not for us? Okay, let me spend a second on that so we get it. Is often we have these pockets of our area in areas of our lives where we feel like because of this, I wonder if God's goodness is for me. It could be something you've done or was done to you. It doesn't matter. This area of brokenness that brings me shame, like this is what makes me feel like the exception, and maybe God's goodness isn't for you. What if Jesus wants to meet you right there in that place? What if that is the place of the transformation and healing that he has for you? Those areas that we think make us the exception, he wants to come and bring light into them and transformation and make it part of your testimony. For the woman, the thing that had condemned her as the exception her whole last 12 years is now the place where she gets to proclaim, that's what I was, but he met me there and he healed me. He healed that thing. So I'm just trying to draw out those areas that we sometimes think, man, that's the thing that makes me the exception and not really for the goodness of God, that Jesus is just waiting to touch and heal that place. That's one invitation. Second is to embrace this new identity as son and daughter and to be fully known and to really dive into what all that is like for you as you are that redeemed, that picture of Jairus' daughter being healed and the celebration that happens, that is the heart of God for you when we come to him, and that he just so desperately wants to keep that connection and remain knowing you and being known by you throughout all your days and all the great things you go to do. So really dive into and embrace what it means to be one of the lost sons or daughters who has been redeemed to the Father. That's the second invitation. And then the third one is just like chapter 9, now we get to go and do. Like this kingdom, this goodness that is so awesome and so fun for us to sit here and think about and ponder. Now we get to be the ones who are the sent out ones who get to go and bring that kind of good news to the people around us. And even right back with where I started, if we could just bring the picture of the real Jesus. This Jesus is really appealing. He's so compassionate and he's so powerful and he's so good and intentional and deep. Man, if they could all just see that guy. And so now it's for us to go and bring this kingdom in everything that we do, whether it's the job or the house, in your home, with your friends, whatever it is, we have the privilege, the honor, the joy to bring that kind of good news and reveal that Jesus to the people around us. All right, those are the invitations. Obviously, whatever else God wanted to do and move through your heart, let's hold on to those things. I'm going to pray, and then I think we got a next thing happening. Yeah? Cue, was that the right cue? The next thing happened? Okay, I'm going to pray. God, thank you for this morning. Thank you that I could just be here with these new friends, and thank you that we are already family in you, Jesus. And I just pray that just the truths of the encounters that you had through Luke 8, would those same things that are real for us, that you would cement those in our hearts, that you would help us to see and understand who you are more and more every single day, and to enjoy the fruit of this beautiful relationship that you have redeemed. And so I pray for every heart here that they would know, one, who you are, and two, who they are with you and in you. And just thank you for this morning. We praise your name. In Jesus' name, amen.